Alexander the Great's Conquest, Balkan Campaign 335 BC. What do you do when your father, the most powerful king in Greece, is murdered at his daughter's wedding? If you're Alexander, you don't mourn. You sharpen your sword, silence your enemies, and prepare to conquer the world. In the autumn of 336 BC, a dagger plunged into the ribs of Philip II of Macedon, and with it, the fate of Greece hung in the balance. Who orchestrated the assassination? Why did his own bodyguard turn traitor? And how did a 20-year-old prince, barely out of his tutor's shadow, rise to command the most fearsome army in Europe? This is the story of Alexander the Great's Balkan campaign, a whirlwind of rebellion, revenge, and ruthless brilliance. From the wagon-traps of Mount Haemus to the midnight slaughter at Pelium, from the cryptic Celts, who feared only the sky, to the fiery destruction of Thebes, this campaign wasn't just a warm-up, it was a warning. How did Alexander outwit entire tribes with psychological warfare? Why did Thebes gamble everything on a rumor and lose their city forever? What did Alexander inherit that made him unstoppable? Who were the giants that dared defy him? And what did they fear more than death? This isn't just history, it's a cinematic saga of ambition, betrayal, and the birth of empire. Philip II of Macedon, the architect of Macedonian dominance and father of Alexander, stood at the pinnacle of his power. He had unified Greece under the League of Corinth, also called the Hellenic League, after his victory at Chaironea in 338 BC. His next move? A grand invasion of the Persian Empire. But fate had other plans. During the lavish wedding of his daughter Cleopatra to Alexander I of Epirus in Aegae, Philip entered the theater unguarded, a gesture meant to show confidence and approachability. As he walked among nobles and dignitaries, Pausanias of Orestis, one of his own bodyguards, lunged forward and stabbed him between the ribs. Pausanias tried to flee, but tripped on a vine root. He was caught and killed on the spot. The motive? A tangled web of personal grievance and political intrigue. Pausanias had once been Philip's lover, but was later humiliated by Attalus, a powerful noble. When Philip failed to defend Pausanias's honor, resentment festered. Some suspected Queen Olympias, Philip's wife and Alexander's mother, of orchestrating the murder to secure her son's succession. With Philip dead, Macedonia teetered on the edge of chaos. But Antipater, Philip's trusted general and regent, acted swiftly. He rallied the army and nobles to support Alexander, then just 20 years old. Alexander was no ordinary youth. Born to Olympias and Philip II, he was raised in a court of ambition and intellect. His tutor, none other than Aristotle, who instilled in him a love of philosophy, science, and strategy. Alexander's education blended the best of Greek thought with the brutal realities of Macedonian politics. He was charismatic, fiercely intelligent, and already battle-tested. At Chaironea, he had led the cavalry charge that broke the Theban sacred band, earning the respect of hardened veterans. His upbringing had forged a man of vision and fire, capable of commanding loyalty and fear. Upon ascending the throne, Alexander inherited three powerful assets. First, the Macedonian army. Phalanx, a tightly packed formation of pikemen wielding sarissas, long spears, virtually unstoppable from the front line. Companion cavalry, elite horsemen trained for shock charges and flanking maneuvers 10. Marshals, seasoned commanders like Parmenion, Antipater, and later Hephaestion, who had served under Philip and now pledged loyalty to Alexander. 2. The Hellenic League. Formed after Chaironea, this federation of Greek city-states, excluding Sparta, recognized Philip, and now Alexander, as Hegemon 11. It gave Alexander legitimacy and access to Greek manpower for his Persian campaign. 3. A vision of empire. Philip had laid the groundwork for a pan-Hellenic crusade against Persia. Alexander seized this vision and made it his own. Alexander had just crushed descent in Greece with ruthless efficiency. Thebes lay in ruins, and the Hellenic League bowed to his authority. But before he could cross into Asia and challenge the mighty Achaemenid Empire, he had to silence the northern thunder. Thracian and Illyrian tribes, emboldened by Philip's death, rose in rebellion. The rowdy tribes of Thrace and Illyria, who threatened to stab Macedon in the back the moment he turned east. So from Amphipolis he led a formidable force, 12,000 pegetairoi, heavy infantry phalanx, 8,000 light infantry, skirmishers, archers, and javelin throwers, 3,000 cavalry, shock troops, and scouts. This was not just a march, it was a statement. The first real test came at Mount Haemus, a narrow defile rising steeply, today's Shipka Pass in Bulgaria. The Thracians, fierce and cunning, had fortified the heights with a wagon palisade, a deadly barricade of carts rigged to roll downhill and crush anything in their path. Alexander, ever the tactician, saw through the ploy. He knew the terrain favored the defenders, and that the wagons were meant to shatter his phalanx like pottery. So he devised a countermeasure, archers to the right flank, phalanx regiments in the center, hypaspists, elite shield-bearers on the left. He instructed his men with surgical precision. If terrain allowed, open gaps in the formation and let the wagons roll through. If not, lie prone, shields locked overhead like a tortoise shell. The wagons thundered down, but the Macedonians didn't flinch. They executed the maneuver flawlessly. Not a single man was lost. The phalanx rose with a cheer, morale surging like wildfire. With the wagon threat neutralized, Alexander ordered his archers forward. They loosed volley after volley, disrupting the Thracian lines. The phalanx advanced steadily, shields gleaming, spears bristling. The Thracians, poorly armored and outmatched, broke under pressure. The Macedonians surged over the lip of the pass and routed the defenders. 1,500 Thracians were killed. Many more fled into the hills. Women, children, equipment, and goods were captured, not just spoils, but funds for the Persian campaign. This wasn't just a battle, it was a masterclass in tactical adaptation. Alexander turned a deadly trap into a morale-boosting victory. He proved to his men that he could outthink and outfight any enemy, even in hostile terrain. And with Thrace pacified, the road to Illyria, and eventually Persia, lay open. The spring of 335 BC was no ordinary season in the Balkans. It was the prelude to a storm, not of weather, but of ambition. Alexander, newly crowned and barely 21, was carving his legacy with the edge of a sarissa and the fire of a vision. And just as the northern tribes were licking their wounds from his Thracian campaign, a curious delegation arrived, tall Celts, towering warriors from the misty lands beyond the Danube. Alexander, ever the strategist and showman, welcomed the Celtic embassy with pomp. He asked them what they feared most, expecting, perhaps even demanding, that they say his name. But the Celts, with stoic faces and booming voices, replied, "We fear only that the sky may fall on our heads." It was a statement of cosmic defiance. Alexander, unimpressed but intrigued, dismissed them as friends. He had no time to dwell on riddles. The Balkans were stirring again. With Thrace subdued, Alexander turned westward through the Shipka Pass, entering the lands of his ally King Langarus of the Agrianians. Langarus, a fierce warrior and loyal friend, had brought his elite Agriani skirmishers, nimble, deadly javelin throwers who could dance across mountain terrain like shadows. But the news was grim. Clitus, Glaucius, and a prince of the Autariantes were in revolt. Alexander knew that if these Illyrian rulers united, they could threaten his rear during the Persian campaign. So he acted with lightning speed. He left Langarus to deal with the Autariantes and raced toward Pelium, Clitus's mountain fortress in the Apsus Valley, a place surrounded by thick woods and steep hills, accessible only through a narrow pass, a trap waiting to be sprung. Alexander arrived before Pelium and found the defenders retreating behind their walls. The plain was his. He encamped, confident, and began assembling siege equipment. But within 24 hours, Glaucius arrived with his Taulantian warriors, seizing the wooded heights and trapping Alexander in the valley. The Macedonian king was now encircled, a predator turned prey. Running low on supplies, Alexander sent Philotas with the baggage train and cavalry to forage. Glaucius pounced, nearly surrounding them, but Alexander, ever watchful, charged to the rescue with Agrianus, Hypaspis, and 400 cavalry, driving Glaucius back into the hills. Still, the situation was dire. If Alexander tried to retreat, Clitus could strike from behind. If he stayed, starvation and annihilation loomed. Then came one of the most brilliant psychological maneuvers in ancient warfare. Alexander formed his Sarissa phalanx, 120 ranks deep, flanked by 200 cavalry. He ordered a silent drill. Sarissas raised to the sky. Lowered in perfect unison, the phalanx pivoted left, right, back, forward, like a machine of war. The Taulantians, watching from the hills, were mesmerized. They had never seen such discipline, such precision. And then, the final signal. The phalanx clattered their spears against their shields, unleashing a thunderous war cry. At that moment, the Hetairoi cavalry on the left flank formed a wedge and charged the hilltop positions. The Taulantians broke. Panic spread. They abandoned their posts and fled into Pelium, leaving Alexander free to reclaim the heights. After his dazzling drill display at Pelium, Alexander seized the moment. He marched his army toward a ford in the Apsus River, east of the fortress. Securing a hill above the crossing, he sent his Hypaspists first, followed by the phalanx. But the Illyrians, realizing their prey was slipping away, descended on the crossing. Alexander, with his companions and Agrianes, held the line long enough for a historic move. Field artillery, siege catapults, were deployed on the far bank. Bombardment began. Arrows rained. The crossing was completed. Not a single Macedonian was lost. Alexander didn't flee. He withdrew a few miles, rested his men, and sent scouts. After 3 days, they returned with gold. The Illyrians thought he was gone. Their camps were unguarded, unfortified, and strung out. Under cover of darkness, Alexander returned with his elite force, companions, Agrianes, and archers. The assault was swift and savage. Arrian writes, "Some they killed in their beds, others they took without difficulty as they tried to escape." Clitus fled to Pelium, set it ablaze, and escaped to Glaucius. The Illyrian threat was crushed. But victory brought grim news. Rumors spread that Alexander had died fighting the Tribalians. Thebes, long resentful of Macedonian rule, seized the moment. They killed 2 senior officers of the Macedonian garrison and raised the banner of rebellion. Alexander's response, 30,000 troops 250 miles, 18 miles a day, through mountains, valleys, and disbelief. He arrived at Onchestus, outside Thebes. The city was stunned. Surely this was Antipater. Alexander was dead, wasn't he? He was very much alive and furious. Alexander offered peace. He asked for Phoenix and Prothites, the ringleaders. Thebes refused. Instead, they demanded Philotas and Antipater, and called on all Greeks to rally under Persia and Thebes. Alexander's rage ignited. Thebes launched attacks on his siege works. Macedonian blood was spilled. Alexander moved to the Electrogate, near the Cadmeia fortress. After 3 days, a segment of Thebes's army deployed outside the walls. Alexander responded with phalanx in force, assault units on the walls, Perdiccas's reserve near the palisade. Quintus Curtius Rufus writes, "The Macedonians exerted a force that could hardly be withstood, but the Thebans were superior in bodily strength and constant training." The battle was brutal. The Thebans nearly broke the phalanx, but Perdiccas's reserves outflanked them. Archers followed. The Cadmeia garrison broke out. The Theban line collapsed. The Electric Gate clogged with fleeing hoplites. Macedonians surged in. Street fighting erupted. A final stand near the Amphium was crushed. Alexander handed the city's fate to his Boeotian allies, long oppressed by Thebes. They chose annihilation, 6,000 killed, 30,000 enslaved, temples stormed, homes burned, land divided. Thebes ceased to exist. Alexander turned to Athens, demanding 10 strategoi. But Demades, a skilled orator, persuaded him to forgive. Alexander relented, but the damage was done. Historian Peter Green writes, "Outwardly they collaborated, but they never forgave him." Thebes' destruction was a warning. Greece bowed, but with bitterness. With Greece pacified and the Balkans subdued, Alexander turned east. The Achaemenid Empire awaited. The greatest conquest in history was about to begin.